Bring on the chaos. I absolutely love it. Welcome to NFL Power Rankings. It is presented by Energizer. Mike Am, Eric Edholm with you. And if you haven't seen Eric's entire article of all of the rankings on NFL.com, you can scan the QR code or you can check it out online. Eric, I got to tell you, I read the article. I love like these sneak peeks. I love working on this show because I get to read everything before it actually hits the website, which is kind of cool for me. I think your assessment is spot on, and maybe not, we'll disagree on a couple of the slots where we'll put some teams, but expect the unexpected. And the reality is, now that we're essentially a quarter way through the season, I think we're getting some clarity on some of these teams and how we expect them to play the rest of the year.
Yeah, we didn't have as much wild movement at week 5 as we did in week 4, but there was still quite a bit of movement. And I think if you take back a look back at what we had in week 1 or even the preseason edition, there's been a lot of change, obviously, especially on the NFC side where Minnesota, Washington, Tampa Bay, some teams have outperformed expectations, or certainly in the case of the Commanders. But yeah, we'll see how long this can hold up too. I mean, Vikings had a 4-0 record not too long ago, finished 8-8, so that can certainly happen to this club if Sam Darnold doesn't keep it up.
So I watch the games now on Sunday a little bit differently. I think to myself, where's Eric going to have this team when the matchup is done? And there was one team in particular, I was like, maybe there's going to be a change. I didn't think there was really going to be a change at the top, but there was. You name check Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings. We got a new number one. The Vikings still undefeated. They move into the number 1 spot on the power rankings. Kansas City drops 1. They had been sitting there all season long. They did get a win, but it was a close one, and there's obviously some injury concerns now with Rashee Rice at that wide receiver spot. The Detroit Lions on Monday night, Jared Goff was perfect. Number 4, the Bills, a little surprise for me, just 1 spot decline for Buffalo after a loss against the Ravens. We'll discuss that. The Texans, a comeback win against the Jags, they are at number 5. This Ravens team that we saw on Sunday, this was the one that I think we expected to see all season. They move up 2 spots into the 6th position. The Commanders, hello, moving up 9 spots, and I got to be honest, it makes sense the way that Jaden Daniels and this team is playing. And then the Tampa Bay Bucs start 3-1 for the 4th time in the last 5 seasons. They check in at number 8. But Eric, let's start with the number 1 team, the Minnesota Vikings here. Break it down for me why you felt confident enough in what you've seen through these first 4 games to have them number 1.
Yeah, part of it had to do with what's going on in Kansas City. We'll talk about that in a minute. But obviously, we had a little bit of a Alabama-Georgia thing going on up there in Green Bay where, Minnesota came out 28-0 lead, looked like the dominant team, absolutely getting after Jordan Love defensively, and seeing Sam Darnold continue to throw passes like this. He's been spot on this year. Did have the 1 interception, but Mike, I saw Kevin O'Connell trust Sam Darnold when the lead was starting to shrink away to throw the football and throw them to a victory. They had Aaron Jones back in his old house, right? You could easily hand off to the guy who made a ton of Lambeau leaps in his career, none on Sunday, but instead they realized they have to remain aggressive. Jordan Love was starting to get hot after some early shaky moments, and I think the Vikings played it right. Coaching has been a huge part of what they've done this season. Now, that's not to besmirch any other staff like Andy Reid or John Harbaugh or anybody like that, but what I've seen from Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores this season has been wildly impressive, and another big game for them on the road against a division opponent, making plays like this to seal a victory.
I want to put some context, Eric, around how good this Minnesota Vikings team has been. They've trailed for just 3 minutes and 26 seconds through 4 games. That's the fewest in the NFL. Only team under 27 minutes. That is wild, and that speaks to what you're talking about, a balanced attack. The defense has been great. And by the way, they hit the road now. They're going to London against the Jets. We'll talk about Gang Green coming up. That matchup exclusively on NFL Network this coming weekend, so you want to make sure that you're tuning in for that. The Chiefs, all right, I got to imagine if they're completely healthy, this is a harder decision to drop them 1 spot.
That's exactly right. I mean, I've been kind of stubborn about it. You look at other people's power rankings, they moved on from the Chiefs even with the 4-0 record, just saying, hey, look, Mahomes hasn't been as great, but I really think it has been enough of a good team to this point prior to the Rashee Rice injury that I would have kept them probably number 1, or at least had a real tough debate in my head But once the news came out on Rice, still some, lack of clarity on whether he's going to be out the entire season or what the deal is. But I'm assuming this is going to be another serious injury in line with losing Hollywood Brown in the preseason, losing Isaiah Pacheco a couple weeks ago, making some changes on the offensive line. I was very glad to see Travis Kelce step up on Sunday. It was going to happen at some point. And Kareem Hunt, his first game back since 2018 in Kansas City, was a big part of finishing that one off. They had to bench Carson Steele early in the game after the fumble. There's still some uncertainty there. We're kind of back to where we were last year with all the questions about Mahomes' weapons and how is he going to get this done. We know he can, but, is he going to?
Here's the best part about this from a Kansas City perspective. There's lulls in the season, and they're still winning football games. So they still have some time. I saw a report from Ian Rappaport saying the team exploring some possibilities of acquiring another wide receiver if the Rice injury is as significant as we assume that it is. Number 3, the Detroit Lions. I got to tell you, on Monday night, I don't know if we saw the biting of the ankles and the whole deal, but this team is tough. They are gritty. They were able to sustain a lead and hold on to it. I think there's a lot to love about the Lions.
Absolutely. Did they have their hands full defensively with Geno Smith and the Seahawks? No doubt, right? I mean, they had to hold off a team that had, I think, 38 first downs, 27 of them in the second half. Just an incredible job by Seattle to keep making this a game. But when you have the offensive efficiency that the Lions did Monday night, kind of regaining some of their mojo a little bit. Big performance from Tim Patrick. He's now kind of entering the mix a little bit. Jamison Williams, a couple of really important plays. The run duo there was awesome. And then Jared Goff, one of his 18 for 18 completions there on the night. You throw in the touchdown catch he had, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Lions were perfect as a team, 19 for 19. So you're going to win a lot of football games when you don't have a pass hit the turf. But it took every single minute. Didn't love the way they closed out the game, right? It could have been a little tighter there, allowing the safety at the end. But, man, this is, I said in the column, I lived in St. Louis during the greatest show on turf years. There's a lot of similarities between the two teams. Highly explosive, a little volatile, always interesting. And I'm going to keep watching these guys because they're so much fun. And they seem to be kind of getting back on track a little bit offensively.
Yeah, they are fun. And look, it was the most memorable play of the game with Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had never thrown a pass in his college or NFL career. He's now 1 for 1 with the touchdown pass. He's probably telling Jared, your job is pretty easy. Look at some of my stats and my percentages. And Goff, by the way, his second career reception and his first career touchdown. I saw, obviously, we had the post-game show on NFL Network, and we had played some of Jared Goff's comments after the game. He said it was his first touchdown that he could remember since he was like 7 years old, which is just wild to me. Moving on to number 4 here, the Bills. They dropped 2 spots. Eric, as I'm watching that game against Baltimore and seeing how they lost, I actually thought there was a world where you would drop them more than just 2 spots. Why the amount of respect that you've given them to still keep them where they are?
Yeah, I mean, the first 3 games of the season, they had been really good, I thought, and especially the last 2. And so they had flexed their muscles a little bit. And this was a 21-10 game where the Ravens kind of kept the door open with some of their mistakes. I think had that trick play, the one where Allen fumbled and, the one that Joe Brady says after the game he regrets. Had that play gone a little differently, or if they'd been able to make something happen on that drive, we'd have a different final score and a different story. Not making excuses. They didn't play well defensively. They had their issues with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Offensively, we know there were drop passes. There were missed connections there. And it was the first time in 43 games that they lost, in regular season games, that they lost by more than 10 points. So it does speak to the fact that they are highly competitive. Josh Allen keeps them in almost every game. Sunday was obviously an exception to that. Does it look a little strange that I have the Ravens below them? Yes, but this is sort of the balancing act you have to do where the Ravens had 2 losses, one of them pretty bad to the Raiders. How do you kind of weigh those 2 teams? Head to head is only part of the equation. So that's kind of how I arrived there. Don't worry, Ravens fans. I love your team. I never moved them out, even at 0-2. So I stuck with you guys.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And I think you actually slotted it the right way because it's got to be the entire body of work. And to be fair here, Baltimore hasn't had, and I don't think there's someone higher on the Ravens than me inside our building here at NFL Network. The Ravens, the whole season, they deserve to be, at least right now, behind the Buffalo Bills. By the way, I thought Diggs, we're talking about Buffalo not having questions around personnel. I think it showed up how much they missed him in a game like this, and it hadn't creeped its ugly head through the first couple weeks of the season. We name check the Ravens. They move up to the 6th spot here. Derrick Henry, and last time I checked, the King is still really good.
Unbelievable. To make a statement that early in the game, it really kind of changes your defensive mindset, right? You have a 30-year-old running back at that weight and that kind of power ripping off that long a touchdown. The last 2 weeks, obviously last 3 really, we've seen, this guy is entirely capable of being a huge part of the offense. Didn't happen in week 1, but they found that right mix of getting Henry involved. And, it wasn't a huge throwing day for Lamar Jackson. They didn't need him to, right? Everything was going so smoothly up front. So almost a near perfect offensive script. As I mentioned in the Buffalo part there, still want to see them cut down on those mistakes. They could have taken this thing and blown it wide open earlier in this, but did kind of leave the door open a little bit. We know that was an issue in Dallas, held on for victory. It was an issue against the Raiders. That's one thing they have to clean up, but the talent's there for a top 10 team, no doubt.
Yeah, look, the way that they won this football game reminds us of what this Ravens team is in terms of team identity. Run the football, almost 200 yards for Derrick Henry, 199 to be exact, by the way, which is the most rushing yards by a Ravens player since Ray Rice back in 2011. And then defensively, this is a good Buffalo offense, and they looked good on that side of the football. It is time for Power Moves presented by Energizer. All the Commanders moving up 9 spots to number 7. Oof. Eric, I was waiting to see what was going to happen and how you were going to treat it. I expected a shootout against the Arizona Cardinals. It was a one-sided shootout. They were dominant, and the best rookie quarterback in the NFL is named Jaden Daniels.
He's been special, and I thought he had a great chance beginning of the year to be offensive rookie of the year. And Cliff Kingsbury was a big reason why he goes back to Arizona, exacts a little revenge against his former team, but, didn't make a big deal out of it because he's got this star quarterback and they are in simpatico right now. And it's been fun to watch the design of the offense, some power, some spread, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. They're explosive offensively. They're hard to defend. The run game's there, and the defense is overachieving too. You can't say enough about the job that Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, and the rest of the crew there have done in rebuilding this locker room and this roster as well.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels, for context on what he's been able to accomplish last 2 games for him, 5 touchdowns, 3 in the air and 2 on the ground. I'm going to repeat that. 5 touchdowns, Eric, 6 incompletions over the last 2 games. He's
over 80%. He leads the league. It's nuts. It's crazy.
It's wild. And I think you said something in your column, once again on NFL.com, analysis on all 32 teams. Why not Washington win this division, considering how Dallas and New York and Philadelphia are playing? So I can't believe I'm saying that. The Washington Commanders might win the NFC East. Another team that's on the move, 7 spots, Tampa Bay up to 8. I think the win that you witnessed, Eric, made you even pause because this is a significant jump. And I think you were a little on the fence about this team over the last few weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, didn't have them too much lower than this. The big drop after the Denver game. I think we realized, look, Denver went on the road, won a tough game against the Jets. Maybe they're a little better opponent than I realized or some other folks did. I don't know. I think we're going to look back at that Denver game and just say that was kind of their hiccup, their mulligan, whatever you want to call it. Baker was back in command. The defense got after the Eagles. Shorthanded Eagles team, granted. They were missing some star players, no doubt about it. But I loved what the Fighting Mayfields did against that Eagles defense that really kind of shut down the Saints the week before, made it tough for them to, keeping them on the field for long drives and explosive plays. And it was a feel-good game, a get-right game for the Bucs, and they certainly made that big statement. And they're my favorites for the NFC South, but there's another team I know you like we're going to talk about later that could give them a little push.
Yeah, look, the division's still really competitive, but to your point, I think they have to be the favorite. And by the way, I do think it's important to highlight the lives that have been affected in the South because of the hurricane and the fact that Tampa Bay was able to get a win like this. Look, it's a small level of solace, but I think a lot of people need those distractions on the weekends and Sundays to think about what's happening in their actual lives. That's not good right now. Yep. So our thoughts and prayers and good vibes that we are sending to everyone that was affected from that perspective. But hopefully if you're watching this show, we're making a little fun for you. In fact, Eric, there's one team, and Tampa Bay fans can laugh all that they want because they were a Super Bowl contender, and yet they are free falling. We will tell you who that team is coming up next on Power Rankings. Back here on Power Rankings, presented by Energizer, Eric's teams 9 through 16. The Green Bay Packers, following the loss, still stay in the top 10. The Steelers, they were perfect on the season, but they lost to the Colts, so they dropped to the 10th position. Seattle, there were questions around how good this team was. They stay flat at number 11. The Niners, also flat. To get back into the win column, they're number 12. The 13th ranked team, the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a free fall. We'll talk about them, dropping 8 spots. The Saints are at 14. The Jets at 15, just ahead of that game in London. There's some tension brewing in New York. And the Colts at 16, Anthony Richardson banged up. Joe Flacco, Jonathan Taylor, the keys to success against Pittsburgh. All right, at number 11 here, I think the conversation should start with the Seattle team. Eric, this is a squad that was perfect. We said, hey, who are they beating? How good are they? I know the score might tell you one story against what we saw in Detroit against the Lions. I actually think they hung tough, and I think this is a pretty good football team.
Absolutely, yeah. I think when you also consider the fact how much they were actually missing on defense, Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, the first round pick, Nwosu, Boye Mafe had a sack in every game up till Monday night. So a lot of defensive firepower. They lose Julian Love during the game as well. So they were up against it, but you look at what Geno Smith did. I mean, he played a tremendous game, like really one of his best career games, and was constantly keeping them in the game with darts all over the field. Kenneth Walker, I swear, traversed half of Michigan on Monday night, barreling through Lions tackles, and he had a great return to the field after missing a couple games. And you know what those receivers can do. That one DK turnover really cost them early, but he was shredding them all night. So was Jackson Smith and Jigba. Mike McDonald, I think, gets it. He's a good coach. He found the right script after they fell behind to kind of keep them in the game. Yeah. Trusted Geno, did what he could defensively. But when they get healthy on that side of the ball, I think they're going to really push the 49ers. I don't know if it's going to be all season long, but I think they're going to have some firepower to stay in this NFC West race.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. 395 yards for Geno Smith, career high for him. 3 rushing touchdowns for Walker, also a career high. Couldn't wait to talk to you about this team, the Philadelphia Eagles. I think it's probably panic in Philly. I get what that fan base is, but let's keep in mind here, the wide receivers, Brown and Smith, did not play. Lane Johnson on that offensive line. I can story this team still being a very quality football team, and yet based off of your power rankings and the fact that we're doing this every single week, I felt like you had to drop them.
I did too. I just sat there and said, look, as impressive as week 3 was, it was a big win for them. They take a big step back here, even shorthanded, right? We talked about the Seahawks just a moment ago and what they were able to do. That felt more impressive than what the Eagles could do. Again, against a good Bucs team. I think we need to give them their respect, but the same problems are cropping up. Jalen Hurts, another turnover. Those have been adding up. He's got 27 of them since the start of last season, about 20 games there. The defense not being able to stack back-to-back impressive performances. That's a problem. I mean, that's, they spend all these first-round picks on pass rushers, and they go out and spend on defensive tackles, and they're still giving up chunks of yards up front. So I just feel like this bye week couldn't have turned worse in terms of the timing of it. Now the pressure is all on this Eagles team to come back stronger after the bye. Going to be a lot of talk about Nick Sirianni and what he can do. Not everybody is convinced he's the right man for the job, fans or otherwise. So I'll be fascinated to see if there is an answer, because I do think the firepower is there and health is a big part of it, but they got to play better football.
Yeah, look, we can point to health, and we have, even with the Kansas City Chiefs, the top of the rankings, who now fall to number 2. The reality is there are some teams that are able to overcome some of these injuries.
Sure.
I mean, case in point, we'll talk about the Titans, right? They lose their starting quarterback and Will Levis during the game, and yet still figure out a way. You got to step up is really the point here. Dropping 4 spots, the Saints to 14. Younghoe Koo, my guy, down in Atlanta, bearing a 58-yard field goal, 2 seconds left for the win. This is a heartbreaker. The Saints dominant these first couple weeks, and these like razor edge thin margins that they're losing by. I don't know if that's the mark of, hey, a really good team, or one that I should be questioning.
Yeah, they're a tough one to figure out. They've been one that I really kind of grapple with over the first 4 weeks of the season, the explosive start, and then the last 2 thuds, coming down to the last second, but still in a game where the offense was good, but I don't think good enough. Now they're missing 2 offensive linemen as well, but they dominated the first possession of the game, looked great, and then things got a little clunky after that. Atlanta won the game with no offensive touchdowns. So, the mistakes in the special teams game and then also a deflected pass that's run back for a touchdown, those are the kind of things that the Saints probably could have overcome when they were scoring 40 points a game to start the year. But now that things have slowed down a little bit, those are the things that shrink the margin of error for them. And, Dennis Allen's another guy who came into this season facing a lot of pressure. It cooled way off. Clint Kubiak was the most popular guy in New Orleans, but all of a sudden that's now kind of reverted back to the middle a little bit. So, they might be looking up at teams like the Bucs and Atlanta for that division. And they've got to find a way to get their mojo back, right? Alvin Kamara's been great, but they still need other playmakers. Olave emerged late in that game, but Rashid Shaheed had the early mistake with the fumble and couldn't quite make up for it down the stretch.
Here's the worst part about this from a Saints perspective, and it's also the best part. Monday Night Football against the Kansas City Chiefs. You lose this one, it's now 3 consecutive losses. You win this one, and I think we start talking about the Saints like we did after the first 2 weeks of the season.
Great point.
Still more to come here on NFL Power Rankings. Thank you, Eric. I will take some kudos from you. Chargers, Bengals. At one point during the course of the season, we were talking about them as top 10 teams. They're nowhere close. See where they land. Coming up next. Welcome back to Power Rankings presented by Energizer. Eric's team 17 through 24. The Cowboys checking at number 17. The Chargers at one point were a top 10 squad, started 2-0. They've dropped now back-to-back games. They fall to 18. The Falcons at 19. The Broncos with the win against the Jets. It was a tough one. They showed up for Bo Nix. They are at 20. The Bengals were also a top 10 team at one point. They needed a win. They got the win, but they sit at 21. The Bears, hello, run the football. They're at number 22. The Rams at 23. They are the walking wounded. And at number 24, hat tip to Antonio Pierce and the Raiders. No Devontae Adams, no Max Crosby, and you still are able to take out the Browns at 24. It's time for Future Champions presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. And here we go in the NFC South. The Atlanta Falcons still the favorite. The Tampa Bay Bucs behind them. The Saints check in right behind the Bucs. And then it's Carolina, even with Andy Dalton, as not exactly the favorite to go into this division. The Atlanta Falcons, you had America at number 19. They keep winning football games. I get it. There's some questions around that team's offense. But in crucial situations, Kirk Cousins and company, they're dealing.
They are, but you got to get in the end zone, Mike. I mean, that's my big problem with them. So they have trouble scoring right now, and they did have a touchdown call back on a questionable penalty, but there are times when Kirk Cousins, the passing game, is a little laborious, and they can't figure out exactly when they should be leaning on their run game. But look, opportunistic special teams, they were great on that side of the ball. Defense made the big play, Troy Anderson's pick 6. They got it done. They're kind of the masters of the close games, right? I mean, they don't win them all, right? They lost one to the Chiefs and also lost in week 1 to the Steelers, but all 4 games have come down to the final minute. So they're getting battle tested in these playoff-like atmospheres. And they did it with some backup offensive linemen last week. So I do give them credit for that.
Yeah, even late in these games, I start feeling like, hey, maybe Kirk can deliver, and he was able to, and Younghoe Koo putting it through the uprights for a career-long 58-yard field goal. Meanwhile, the rest of the rankings here at 25, the Arizona Cardinals, they got annihilated by Washington. The Titans with a win at 26, the Giants at 27, the Browns, I don't know what's going on with this team. They check in at 28. At 29, it's the Patriots. The Dolphins at 30, 31, it's the Panthers, and the winless team in the NFL is the Jags at 32. How concerned are you about Miami, who drops 5 spots? That was not pretty on Monday night.
I'd love to be able to do the Mike McDaniel face when there's about 5 minutes left. They're down 22-6. Jordan Poyer's been ruled out. Tyreek Hill is barking behind him. Tyler Huntley's struggling on the field. Everything is going wrong. The fans wanted to be anywhere but Hard Rock Stadium. It's a mess right now. They have a couple winnable games, but it is a mess, and I don't know how they're going to figure it out.
Yeah, look, watching his press conference there, he said, number one, all things on the table when it comes to changing things on the offensive side. Disappointed. I know Tyler Huntley is a guy that can get it done, but he was disappointed in the guys around him not delivering. There was a lot of drops in this game. Eric, you're the best. You got the toughest job in the building ranking these teams. We will do it again next week. Thanks for watching and listening.